Alrighty, today we're going to be taking notes and then doing a short Delta Math assignment just over circles and how you can graph them on Desmos and certain problems involving coordinate planes and graphing circles and all of that. The main idea here is that if you have an equation of a circle with a center at HK, then the equation for the circle with a radius r is going to be x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. Okay, this is the most important formula that you can have. And we're going to really quickly just talk about what happens if hk is at the origin, if it's at 0, 0. Okay, so if h is 0, then x minus 0 squared would be x squared. If k is at 0, then y minus 0 squared would just be y squared, because subtracting 0 does nothing. And this would be equal to the radius squared. Okay, so if your center's at 0, 0, you're going to use that formula instead, which brings us to our foldable. So if you need to get your foldable out now, and go ahead and fill in the following information. So we have, if you have your center at h comma k with the radius r, this would be your equation. And if your center is at 0, 0 with a radius r, this would be your equation. Take the time now to also fill in the formula for distance. And I just drew a little picture here. You don't have to have this image on there, but it's helpful because we will need to solve for the radius in some cases, in which case we need to use the distance formula, which is something that we've used before. Okay, so it's not that big of a deal. You could also, on the Delta Math, you could just use the Pythagorean theorem. It actually comes from the Pythagorean theorem, so feel free to use this formula or the Pythagorean theorem based on the right triangle you get. Alrighty, once again, you could just pause to get that info, and we will continue on with the notes. Okay, what is the center and the radius of the circle with the equation x squared plus y squared equals 25? Okay, well, we can tell that there's no h and no k, so h must be equal to 0, and k must be equal to 0, because we have x minus 0 squared plus y minus 0 squared equals r squared. Okay, this also tells us that r squared is equal to 25, okay, which means that my radius is going to be equal to the square root of 25, if we take the square root of both sides to get rid of the square. The square root of 25, you can just type that in, that is just 5. So we get a center at 0, 0 and a radius of 5. Very similar thing going on with part B. This is also going to have a center at 0, 0. And this time r squared is equal to 49. And if we take the square root of that, r would be equal to 7. Okay, so once again, if they give you the radius squared, then the radius itself is going to be the square root of that. So it'd be the square root of 49, which is 7. Moving along, it says, what is the standard form of the equation of the circle after its center is translated 3 units to the left? So we start at 0, 0. And we go left 3, and then we go up 2. Okay, so if we go to the left 3, that's going to change the x-coordinate to negative 3. And if we go up 2, it's going to change the y-coordinate to positive 2. Okay, these are going to be our values for h and k. So we just need to plug them into the standard form equation. Okay, and we're still going to have the same radius. All we did was move it. So it'd be x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals 49. In this case, h is negative 3, so it's actually going to be x minus negative 3. Okay, and I'll put the negative higher up so you can tell it's a negative and not a minus. Plus y minus 2 squared equals 49. And here we have the two negatives. This is going to make a positive in our final equation. We're going to have x plus 3 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 49. Okay, if you have the equation of a circle, you pretty much just flip the sign. So you'll notice that this -3 for h became a +3 in the equation. And this +2 for k became a -2 for k in the equation. Okay, so you just have to flip the sign from going from the center to the equation. Alrighty, feel free to do part A and B on your own. I'm going to do part C, which says that h and k are -2 and -1 respectively, and that my radius is square root of 2. Okay, we know that the equation is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. Okay, in this case, my radius is going to be the square root of 2. Okay, my value for h is -2, so we need to make that a +2 in the equation. We just flip the sign. And my value for k is -1, so we need to make that a +1. We just flip the sign. Okay, if we simplify this and just get the final equation, we get x plus 2 squared plus y plus 1 squared is equal to the square root of 2 squared. So these are actually going to cancel each other out, and this would just be equal to 2. All right, let's go to the back of these notes. Okay, on part B, it says, what is the center and radius of the circle with the equation x minus 2 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 100? Okay, so we have a couple of things here. We have x minus h squared. We have y minus k squared. And just lining everything up so we can see obviously like what part is what, is equal to r squared. Okay, so the center, you can think about it as just flipping the sign, is going to be h comma k, which is going to be +2 comma +3. And the radius, well, if r squared equals 100, then the radius itself would be the square root of that, which would be 10. Okay, for this next one, we're going to have to use a little bit of thinking. We can't just use the numbers that they give us, okay? Because it doesn't give us the radius. So the main question here is, what is the radius? And we need to figure that out. Because we can tell with the center at 1 comma -3 that h comma k, well, h is 1, +1, is k, and k is -3. Okay, so let's start writing our equation, even though we don't know the formula yet. It's going to be x minus 1, because we flipped the sign of h, plus y plus 3, we flipped the sign of k, is equal to r squared. Okay, we need to figure out what that radius is. If we go over here, it says it passes through the point 2 comma 2, which if we look on our graph is right here at 2 comma 2. And to figure out the radius, we're going to need to calculate the distance from 2 comma 2 to 1 comma -3. Okay, there's a couple ways we can do this. We could use Pythagorean theorem, in which case we would just consider this right triangle where it has a base of 1 unit and the vertical length of it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we would just solve for C. So you could use Pythagorean theorem. I will use the distance formula just to get you used to using it, because sometimes there's a lot of squares to count, and this is not always the most efficient method. You know what? We'll use Pythagorean theorem for this one, and we'll use the distance formula for the next one. So we'll use Pythagorean theorem. So Pythagorean theorem says that a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. In this case, we're going to use the letter d just for distance. We'll stick to it. We'll use c. Okay, 1 squared is 1, 5 squared is 25, which means that c squared is equal to 26. That means that c squared, well, hold on just a second. Okay, we just found the radius, which in our case we use the letter c. Okay, but what we could do is just consider that distance right here and right here in our triangle, well, that's r. Okay, so if we're solving for r squared, that's all we need to do. Okay, so this is all we need. We could simplify this further and say that r equals the square root of 26, but we don't really need to. Okay, because all we need is r squared. So our final equation is going to be x minus 1 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals r squared, which is 26. And you can check this by typing it into Desmos. So we're going to pick up where we left off and do these delta math problems. Probably one of each. I think I changed it. It's probably just, I think I actually made it less than this. Let's actually pull up in delta math really quick. Ah, yes. Okay. So this is your assignment. It's only 8 problems, one of each of these. We're going to do the first ones on the website itself because this one is just graphing. Okay, we're going to flip the signs of h and k. So we have a positive 6. So the value of x is going to be negative 6. And then we have a positive 6 for the k coordinate. So that's going to be a negative 6 for the y value. So the coordinate of the center would be negative 6 comma negative 6. And we'll just get that as close as we can. And then the radius is going to be, well, this would be r squared equals 1. So that means that r equals 1. So in this case, I got really lucky. So my radius is just 1. So that is just the answer. Okay, if you click on show an example, obviously you could end up with 16, in which case you'd have to take the square root of 16 and get the radius as 4. But hopefully that's straightforward enough for you to get it. The next type of problem we'll work on is the second section, determine the equation of the circle graphed below. To do this, we're going to have to find the center just by looking at where the diameters are. So we could see that the center is at 0 comma negative 4, which means that h is 0 and k is negative 4. So my equation would be x minus 0 squared plus y, we'll flip the sign, plus 4 squared is equal to the radius squared. The radius r is going to be, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to be 5 squared. So my final equation will be, well, x minus 0 is just x, so just x squared, plus y plus 4, all of that squared, and that is equal to 5 squared, which is 25. Okay. We'll do the next type of problem on the delta math, which is determine the equation where the radius is equal to the square root of 135. And the center, h comma k, is at negative 6 comma negative 9. So my equation would be x minus h, which in this case would be plus 6, because we flipped the sign, squared, plus y plus 9, because we flipped the sign, squared, is equal to r squared. Okay, so it's going to be whatever the radius is squared. My radius happens to be the square root of 135. So all we have to do is square that. When you square a square root, everything goes away, cancels out like that. And we get x plus 6, all of that squared, plus y plus 9, all of that squared, is equal to 135. And that's what you would type in for your answer on Desmos. All right, lastly, we will do the last section, which is using the distance formula. I didn't use the distance formula in the notes, but we are going to here. Once again, the distance formula is going to be a big formula. It's going to be x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Okay, where the x and y coordinates come from your graph. So x2 and x1 are going to come from those x values. And y2 and y1 are going to come from your y values. The reason why we want to find this distance is because this will be the radius. So we can actually change that d to an r, okay? Because we want to find the distance between these 2 points, and that would be the radius. The radius would be equal to big square root. Okay, let's go ahead and call this coordinate 1 and this coordinate 2, just so we know which one's x1 and which one's x2. So we'll take x2, 5, minus x1, which is 3. We'll square that. Plus y2, which is 9, minus y1, which is 3. We'll square that. And then we just need to simplify. Let's see, 5 minus 3 would be 2. So this is 2 squared. 9 minus 3 would be 6. So this is 6 squared. 2 squared is 4. 6 squared is 36. So we get that it's the square root of 40. Okay? Now, we're actually going to leave it just like that because we don't actually need to simplify it to get the equation. Let's see, my circle equation is going to be x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to the radius squared. Now, the radius squared, if we took both sides of this equation and squared it, we would cancel out here, and we get that r squared is actually equal to just 40. Okay, so in this case, when we square it, the square root goes away, so we just get r squared is equal to 40. Okay, we're going to use the center. This is going to be your h comma k to get the equation. It's 3 comma 3. They're both positive. So in my equation, it's going to be minus 3 and minus 3. And this would be your answer for this problem. Okay. If you have any questions, send me an email. Otherwise, be nice to your sub and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Goodbye.